Battlefield 2025. Things are already circulating and conversations are already happening about what the next Battlefield game is going to look like as we start to move away from 2042 and maybe the missteps that were taken in that life cycle. I think most importantly of all, Vince Zampella's recent interview about taking Battlefield back to basics has sparked considerable interest and speculation around what this could actually mean for the future of the next game and also the series as a whole. When Zampella talks about taking Battlefield back to basics, one of the most obvious interpretations of this is a return to the franchise's core formula. Early entries in the series, like Battlefield 1942 and Battlefield 2 as well, established the game as a unique, large-scale multiplayer shooter that emphasized teamwork, strategic use of vehicles, and destructible environments later down the line as well. These elements, combined with Battlefield's traditional sandbox experience, where players could approach objectives in multiple ways, really defined the franchise in my opinion. In comparison to this though, recent Battlefield games have experimented with new ideas that have not always resonated with players. Battlefield 5 introduced Firestorm, which was the Battle Royale mode baked into the game itself, which ultimately had a lukewarm reception, and particularly because it was paywalled behind buying the original game, really felt like it wasn't a true Battle Royale experience. And 2042 took the series into the near future with 128 player battles, drones, and the futuristic technology that we expect to see in that kind of era. Some of these innovations and new game modes were really an attempt to modernize Battlefield, and I appreciate what DICE were going for with that and ultimately trying to compete with a lot of the other shooters in the mainline FPS marketplace, although in my opinion they often came at the expense of what made Battlefield unique in the first place. With this in mind, I think Zampella's back to basics approach likely suggests a desire to refocus on the elements that define the earlier successes of the franchise: large scale, tactical and immersive warfare where teamwork is paramount, and ultimately where players can engage with the environment in meaningful ways. I think in his mindset, the return to the fundamentals could mean revitalizing the series' iconic gameplay mechanics, drawing on teamwork and strategy specifically. I would say that one of the hallmarks of the Battlefield franchise has always been its emphasis around teamwork. Unlike a lot of shooters that encourage individual play, I think Battlefield requires players to work together a lot more to achieve objectives, whether providing support through medics and engineers or using vehicles strategically. In earlier titles, classes definitely played distinct roles that contributed to a team's overall success, encouraging communication and collaboration. Therefore, going back to basics may involve a renewed emphasis on these class-based systems. I think this could maybe mean refining the roles of the different classes, ultimately to ensure they are balanced and effective. For example, a more pronounced distinction between classes, which might encourage players to communicate more actively and share resources, so really drawing on the fact that medics are playing as a medic and healing teammates, whilst engineers are able to take down vehicles, and the assault are ones supplying ammo, etc. to the rest of the team and squads to keep them in the fight. Another element which really resonates with me, and I think a lot of the community, is around destruction and environmental interactivity as well. For me personally, a key aspect of all the original Battlefield games that I played was the emphasis on destructible environments. In titles like Bad Company and Bad Company 2, players could really focus on using explosives to bring down buildings, open new paths, and basically change the battlefield as they played. In my opinion, it not only added a feature for realism, if that's something you're interested in, but also encouraged more strategic play so players could manipulate their surroundings to gain advantages over their opponents. I think in more recent entries to the series, particularly Battlefield 2042, there was a lot of criticism for a perceived lack of meaningful destruction specifically. Of course, the game does have some destructible elements to it, but they often felt very superficial, I would say, compared to a lot of the earlier titles. With this in mind, Zampella's vision for taking Battlefield back to basics could entail a return to this dynamic environment where players can truly alter the landscape in impactful ways. By focusing on deeper, more engaging environmental interactions, hopefully this means that Battlefield could become the franchise that was pioneering this area of the gaming space as it once was. Further on in the article, Zampella also mentions about a move towards a more streamlined player experience and bringing us back to the forefront of the game again. I think this concept might also align with the idea of returning to basics, where core gameplay mechanics are straightforward yet allow for skillful play. As well as this, incorporating player feedback into the development process for the next Battlefield game is absolutely essential in my opinion. Battlefield 2042 faced a huge amount of backlash due to its lack of community engagement, the removal of platoons, and responsiveness to player concerns. I think if they prioritize player input, Zampella and the rest of the teams can help create a game that genuinely reflects the desire of the community, reinforcing the franchise's commitment to its fanbase. Now, although we're talking about taking the franchise back to its roots, I also think there does need need to be some elements of innovation in the next game as well. If we look more broadly at the gaming industry, of course it's always evolving, so players are expecting new features, new mechanics and new experiences. There are some elements of 2042 which they've added in which maybe didn't land as well as they could, but equally others I would love to see brought forward. For example, the plus system I think now needs to be a mainstay in the Battlefield franchise moving forwards, as that was a great addition to gameplay. Divisive elements like AI controlled teammates or drones on the battlefield equally enhance gameplay, but could be straying too far from the core identity of what makes Battlefield great. So the way they need to balance this is going to be a lot more difficult if they continue to implement these types of features. I don't have the answer for this, and I'm not sure other people do directly, other than either get rid of them or keep them in the game. But if they want to introduce more of these elements, it has to be done in a way that complements the core gameplay rather than overshadowing it. I think with Zampella's leadership and the approach they want to take, they are trying to signal a renewed focus on community engagement and inclusivity as well. The best way I think they can do that is by, again, providing regular updates, things like community events and equally transparent communication from developers, but also to implement a CTE like we had in Battlefield 4, as not only will this allow developers to test their new ideas on pockets of the community, but equally gives us a lot more oversight and makes us feel included as members of the community. With all that being said though, I do think Vince Zampella's call to take the Battlefield franchise back to basics pretty much signifies a crucial moment in the history of the franchise. By focusing on core gameplay elements that define the early titles, like strategic gameplay, destructible environments, and player engagement, I hope that the team are aiming to restore the franchise's identity and appeal, not only to us but new players as well, but equally addressing the feedback from us, the players, who've definitely felt alienated by the more recent entries in the franchise that potentially have strayed pretty far from the series roots as a whole. In this way, I think taking Battlefield back to basics could be the key to reviving its status as a leading multiplayer shooter in what is becoming an increasingly more competitive gaming landscape as a whole. Let me know down in the comments below what back to basics in Battlefield means to you and what you want to see removed or added into the next game. As always, I want to thank you all for your time, and equally to those who've signed up to the Patreon membership. Your added support is helping me to produce more and more content, so thanks very much, Bjorn and Curvy Mermaid. With that being said, I look forward to catching you all in the next one.